In this exercise, I'm going to talk about how to complete the assignment on choosing a forecasting method. So let me go through just the calculations here because there seemed to be a bit of confusion. So if I'm talking about a 1 month moving forecast, this really is, it's a naive forecast. What I am doing is I am going to the very first forecast for January 2021. I'm clicking on the block. The January 21 forecast really is what actually happened in December, right? So if I do the January is what happened in December, I can go ahead and click on and drag across these equations because what I'm forecasting to happen in February really is what happened in January. What I'm forecasting for March really is what happened in February here. All right, so that's a 1 month moving average. A 2 month moving average, what I'm doing is taking the sum of the, no, let's do it this way. Let's do average equals the average of the 2 previous months, right? So the forecast, the 2 month moving average forecast for January 21 is the average of November and December. Similarly, you would be able to do the exact same thing for a 3 month moving average, and you would be able to move these forward just like we did before. All right, exponential smoothing. Here are the techniques you need for it. Exponential smoothing says that we are going to take the alpha, which is 0.2, multiply it by the actual data, and take 1 minus alpha and multiply that by the previous forecast. So that is going to be equals 0.2, because we have an alpha of 0.2 here, multiplied by the actual data, plus 1 minus alpha, so 1 minus 0.2 is 0.8, times what the forecast was. All right? So my forecast now comes up for 28.4. This is part of the technique that we need to talk about in forecasting, because when we start looking at decimal places, we probably need to say, wait a second, we really don't forecast in half units. We really would use some sort of rounding technique, right? Where sales come in whole numbers. So a rounding technique for the 31.5, we have to choose one of two things. It says, do I either forecast based on normal rounding, so you round up at 0.5, or do we say if I'm already expecting a fraction of the amount, like 28.4, do I say it's better to forecast 29 so we don't lose that potential? So on mine right now, what we're going to do is we are going to round up. And the reason for doing that now, I'm 28.4 rounds up to 29. And the reason I'm doing that is because now whenever it comes time for me to do my February forecast, remember that with exponential smoothing, what I'm looking at is I need to take 0.2 times the actual, 0.2 times the actual, and the actual for January was 27, plus 0.8 times what my forecast was. Okay. Now, 28.6 is my new forecast, and I'm going to round that up. All right, now you should be able to see how to do all of your exponential smoothing to get to the end. The last thing that we want to look at is linear regression. And with linear regression for the forecast, instead of using the months because of the way Excel does this, if we convert these to time periods. So what I'm going to say is I have 12 time periods worth of data. I'm going to copy and paste in the actual values. And now I can put in, by inserting a scatter plot. And once I do the scatter plot, if I right click on any of the data, I can add a trend line. I want it to be linear. I want to display the equation on the chart, and I want to display the R-squared value. Bring these up. Okay. So here is my linear regression equation. It says that the forecast y equals minus point, and I'm going to round this to 0.25, okay? Minus 0.25 plus 33 point, and I'm just going to leave it at 0.5. Now, I'm going to get rid of the chart. If I want to forecast for January, based on this timeline, you can see January is the 13th time period, right? Oop, you know what I forgot to put? I forgot to put my X in here, because X tells me what point we are in the time series. As a matter of fact, if I want to forecast January, January is going to be equals minus 0.25 times 13, because January is the 13th month in the time series, plus 33.5. So my forecast for January would be 30. All right? Once you have done that, hopefully you'll be able to see now that you can do your linear regression forecast for February and for March. Last step, calculating the MAD. MAD is the mean absolute deviation. That means I'm going to take the absolute value of what I forecast minus what actually happened for January, February, and March of each one of my forecasts. Okay. Now that is the absolute deviation. What I'm looking for is the mean absolute deviation for the 3 months that I have. So that is the average of all of my MAD for that. If you end up with a negative value here in MAD, you have done something wrong, because it is the absolute deviation. How much difference is there? Absolute difference is there between what we forecast and what actually happened. Now you can see that you can do that for each and every one of the steps or each and every one of the forecasting methods, and then choose the forecasting method that works best. All right? Hope this helps.